Hey, the goal of this video is to be quick, 6 minutes. It'll highlight all the benefits of using my Excel sheets. It'll bring up all the potential drawbacks and ultimately leave the decision of whether or not to use these Excel sheets across the firm to you guys. All the sheets are fairly basic, but they're formatted in a way that are beneficial to the reviewers and act as calculators, one place to use all your calculations for the preparers. If there's any questions or features that you have or would want to add into it, just let me know. I'm all ears. Now, HIP gave us work papers that basically spelled out exactly what I'm supposed to do. She totaled all the expenses I need. Now, not all of these go directly to the business, and normally I would create a spreadsheet kind of like this with the home office expenses here and then auto input into the auto expenses and just pull from what UltraTax says into here. Or I can take an additional 5 minutes, maybe additional 5 minutes. It may also take the same amount of time it took to create that spreadsheet and just put it into the expense input here and into the home office calculation. And I'm also allowed to show, hey, I acknowledge all the home office and auto expenses, and most importantly, self-employed health insurance. I saw these and I decided to put them accordingly. Gunnar and I both agree that this is our preferred way of going forward. Not only does it save him time, it's much more digestible for him, and it looks a lot better. And if there's any interest in having our preparers use these sheets going forward, we need to know what exceptions there are going to be to switching clients over into this sheet. An exception that I find admissible we'll see in the third example of our Schedule E's. Okay, now here we have the Bryant file. They actually own two Schedule E properties, SLB and Stelly, and both of them are QuickBooks desktop files. Now, we can just pull these profit and loss reports from QuickBooks and tell the reviewer, you're smart enough to add two different net incomes. You should know what the total that should appear on the Schedule E should be. Or the preparers can take an additional 5 minutes, input them into the expense tab, and it will all populate in a digestible format that they're going to see when they're on Schedule E. And it also allows for items kind of like what we decide to capitalize on the year. And it allows the reviewer to make the decision of, okay, I agree or I disagree with that. Very easy and very orderly. Now, the biggest benefit actually comes from my complex Schedule E calculation. So this is the Mori file, and he not only has more than 3 properties, but he also has expenses that need to be allocated across multiple properties. This one we decided to give it evenly across all properties, but sometimes you need to have it based on the income that you have. So I took what he gave me, which was a sheet of some totals, as well as many receipts of exactly which one goes to which property. So I was able to clean up some of these receipts with my sheet, and for the reviewer, he's able to see what expenses I thought were too much and should capitalize, put on there, and ultimately give him the decision. But also, on allocable expense tab, you can put which ones need to be put across multiple properties, checkbox each property that it needs to go to, and then if you want to distribute it across different incomes, for internet, we can just click income based, and then you'll notice that each of them are different amounts, and they are proportional to how much each property is bringing in. Very cool, very demure. Now, the exception that I find comes from a file like David Clark. Now, his farm rentals come to me in total, so total income and total expenses. And if I use my sheet, I can't distribute these expenses evenly across them, proportional to how much income they bring in, because I have to distribute the income in a way. Now, this one uses it in a way of acres. So this is a prime example of, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Not only would it take forever to make a sheet that would integrate this into a slightly more presentable fashion, but this is already digestible for the reviewer to see and go with. Okay, now my final sheet I want to make known is the one that we use when creating a business return for ones that only give us a profit and loss, or at least the information to create a profit and loss, which we make over here. Now, I have a grievance with this sheet. I absolutely despise the hour adjusting journal entry spot. I've tried to pair them together, which would be like put a number by the ones that match, but that doesn't work when you have two different entries in the same spot, like in draws often happens, or even in cash like is up ahead here. And oftentimes you also get a plug at the end of it. Now, I want everyone in the firm to use the updated form that I made, which is the same thing, a little bit prettier, but you input your journal entries in here just like you would on the proper books. You put your number over here, the account name that you want to attribute it to, debit, credit. You can put the note of why it needs to be adjusted so, and this will actually tell you if they are indeed in balance. And when it comes to that end of the return plug of distributions and cash, you can see what the end of bank balance should be versus what it currently is. And it will auto pull all of these numbers into the slots here as long as you drag my formula into the slot, especially if you have different expenses that you want to add in there. Now, if you care to see a little bit more of how the sheets function, or how to operate them at least, then the rest of the video will be with that. Otherwise, thank you for listening to my pitch. Thank you. Okay, I want to start with the Schedule C sheet. Now, all these sheets, like I said earlier, are pretty easy to operate, but I kind of want to highlight, well, A, how to use them, but also some of the features that each one can use going forward to tie out some of your information. So we'll start with the income input. Here you can put any name. So 1099s is usually the income that you're going to receive, and from Susan Williams or something, right, for $2,000. So that income will auto flow to the cover sheet. Same with the cost of goods. Then we have the other expenses. Now, this is where one thing that you need to remember where to input information is on the other expenses. So on the expense input, we have on the right side here, all these blue lines are expenses that are for the business. So we have Bumbalot on May 10th. Now I know Babolat is actually a supplies. So we got it for 267.98, and this is supplies. But if we had something like a phone bill, right? Phone bill for $50. This doesn't fit into anything except for other expenses. And you can either type it in and it'll autofill in, or you can select it from a drop down. And if you were to accidentally misspell something like Brian, right? It won't let you. So this will only allow you to enter things that will fall through into the cover sheet. So we have other expenses, and normally would be, okay, I want this to be on phone bill, but you'll notice this is also a drop down and you'll get that same error. So the best workaround to make sure that there's no errors and everything gets added up into the correct columns that you want, you put the other expense names here. So we'd put phone here. And then when you go back to the expense page, it's a drop down. And then it'll fall through into other expenses, just like they'd see on the Schedule C. And then what would be on the page 2, you can see the totals for each individual other expense. Then we have the home office, which all these colored panels are ones that you're supposed to input information into. So all the utilities, others like HOA, security, those type of expenses can go here, or you can opt to put them here if you'd like. Total square footage, as well as what's of the office. And if you were to put 2,100, it will auto calculate the simplified option, as well as going as far as to giving you the maximum simplified option. And let's say that's 50%, which is not reasonable at all, but you had 220,000 worth of mortgage interest, 50%, 10,000. It will highlight green, which is the better option. So it'll be quick and easy, and it'll also show the reviewer I checked both numbers, and I went with the one that was highlighted. So if there is income as well as expenses, there will be a net income, and the home office deduction will flow through to here, and it will auto net it against it. Now, let's say we itemized instead of simplified, so 10,000 this time. So 5,000 of home office deduction were to go onto the cover sheet. Now we can't use all of that because it's limited by net income, but you can carry forward the rest, and I implemented this So going forward, we actually have a tie out to all the home office carry forwards that we have going forward. I had worked on a file where they had about $3,000 worth of home office carry forward that UltraTax calculated, but we didn't have anything tying to it, and Gunnar decided that we weren't going to give it to them. They weren't in a good position. They were going to be shutting down the business soon anyway, but this would be a way to also tie it out and just make sure to carry it over from the one that you used the year prior into this slot, and it'll add it onto the total. Okay, let's move on to the Schedule E. Now, this is the basic Schedule E, where all it is the expense input in the cover sheet. But for the sake of just showing it, let's go to the one that actually has more information. It's the same thing, just extra pages, the complex one. So we're going to go with Doc Morey's multiple rental properties and the information they gave us over here. So to input the information correctly, we want to give each property a name. So 705 Riggs, 7033 Riggs, 8008 Reeds, and then 7727 Ash. Then we input the rent received up here, not on any different sheet. And if they had royalties from usually oil on a property, you could put it there. And then the expenses, as you expect, the other expenses are here to be input instead of on a separate sheet. But we'll come back to that. So one of his expenses was insurance. So we have insurance for about 1014, and that was for 7015 Riggs and insurance. Now, a little workaround, if you want a quick tip, is you can actually just input all the different ones if you see insurance is an expense on every single property. So 984, 1104.96, 946.92. Then you can click and drag the name down. Quickly input the numbers and it will autofill. And then also drag. And then I'll show the allocable expenses. So you would input Spectrum, which is up here for an amount, T-Mobile for the amount, other expenses, and then internet and phone, which hopefully would carry over year to year. So we had phone here and internet, right? You'll see that autofills, and that was only there because I ended up deleting those away. And then you want to checkbox every single property that needs it, and then income based if it needs to be income based. So we'll do that for internet. You'll see that phone is 150 across the board, where internet is allocated according to how much they make of the total revenue pool. Now, another tip I like to do on Schedule C, but not here, is whenever I go to print it, you can do print the active sheet, but I usually go to print the entire workbook. Now, this doesn't work for this one because this tries to print all the additional formulas I had to create on other pages, and it gets really messy really quickly. But that is an option. And then if you want to look a little bit neater, you can click on these additional properties out of the 20 that I gave you, and you can hide them. So hide. And there you go. Nice, quick, easy printout. Also, small note I forgot about. Auto and travel are grouped into one because that's what it shows up on the Schedule E. But if you press this little plus, it breaks out individually which one is which. So whenever you're going to input it onto the UltraTax input, you have the separate totals and you don't have to manually go and calculate those. Okay, next we have a really quick exposition for these next two because they're basically the Schedule C but with different names. So this is a farm rental Schedule E, not like the normal Schedule E with 3 different properties. It's like the Schedule C with 1 sheet per property and with updated expenses, and it looks exactly like it would. The expense input will have the classifications according to this page, and it works exactly like the Schedule C with crop and cattle instead. and then the other source of income that you can get instead of cost of goods sold. And it all flows on just like you would see it. Then we also have the Schedule F, which is the exact same. The final large sheet that I want to look at is for the business tie-out sheets that we have for when we receive profit and loss sheets, or the income and expenses that we need to be able to create a profit and loss sheet that we would input here, and then our adjusting journal entries that we need to be able to make it proper and ready for the return. Now, the addition that I made was there's a formula on every single one of our adjusting journal entries per account, and you would input it here, right? But let's say you wanted to add another asset or liability, sorry. So this would be a shareholder loan, a 1-year shareholder loan for, you already had $1,000 out on it. You have that as a cash balance at the end of last year. What you do is you click these separately, of course, and drag them down. And then same for if it's a liability, it's on the right side. So it's balanced. It's exactly what it was the end of year 2022. And then let's say the shareholder loan got bigger, right? You loaned out or got loaned another $1,000. Just like before on the Schedule C, you have the different account names that you input and it'll pull from there. And then this would be credited an additional $1,000 and you received $1,000 cash. You'll notice that as I was typing that, it tells you how much you're off balance or if you are exactly on balance. And over here, you have what should be the end of bank balance, which is input on these usually, which you input there. And you have the current one. So I've made all the adjustments that I need to make for this tax return. So it'd be adjusting journal entry 2, and we have to distribute the rest of the money out. So this would be distributions and cash. We have a distribution of 1,000 off by 1,000, and $1,000 cash was distributed, and the current bank balance is actually off, so we would need to go 2,000. My bad. All balanced. Beginning of next year's retained earnings is going to be negative 2K, but the sheet imbalance is the important thing to look at when you're finally tying up the sheet. So if this was off by 1990, so $10, it would tell you it's off by $10 because your balance sheet doesn't match. As long as you input everything correctly, it will always be perfectly balanced. Now, these other tabs, I decided to get a little cutesy. I have the home office calculation. For the file that I worked on when I was working on this template, the office expense I was able to actually directly pull from the home office calculation. But that's cutesy. It's not going to work in every single one. That could easily be deleted. I might add different sheets for like payroll tie-outs and whatnot. But this is what I have currently. I'd be open to more features that you'd want onto it, and I might need a little bit of help on exactly what the vision would be. And then the other cutesy item is New Year button. So let's say you just copy and pasted this entire worksheet from 2022 into 2023's folder, because it has all your accounts that you had the year before, and it has what should have been the end of year balance sheet that needs to be now distributed over to here. And we have to delete all of these expenses because it's a new year. What you can do is click the New Year button, and it will auto calculate all of that. It auto deletes all this and moves this to over here. You'll notice that it's the end of year numbers from the year before. All you have to do is adjust the 2023 and whatnot. Okay, and finally, we have my last two sheets. They're both examples of a bunch of the mini sheets I kind of have as templates for when these random occasions kind of pop up. So we have the mortgage interest calculator, which you have an example of 700,000, right? Which is under the $750,000 limit of when we have to start reducing how much of the 750 we can take on mortgage interest. I think I explained that correctly. Let's say 20,000 is on the mortgage interest for that mortgage principal, but you have another one for 200,000. You're rich, and an additional 5,000 for simplicity's sake. You're only going to be able to take 83.33% of that, because 750 divided by 900,000 is 83.33. And then you take that, multiply by the total mortgage interest. This auto calculates it, highlights what exactly you're going to put on the schedule A. Then we also have a simple tie-out sheet for when we have to calculate a gain or sale, or a gain or loss on a sale. Easy. You should put all those expenses on this little line. This isn't anything complicated because there's literally only sum functions. So easy. I hope this was informational for you guys, and I really do think that this not only makes the work papers a lot more appealing, but it saves more time for me and it saves more time for the reviewers. So hopefully you guys are able to get the hang of it. There are going to be a lot of files that you can implement this. You might already have worksheets that you use, but I really do think once you transition those files into this one, you will be able to, going forward at least, save a lot of time and effort, and you'll have all your expenses that transition year to year onto one thing, and then you have one place to calculate all your expenses. It's just going to be so much easier. So I hope it's useful. Thank you.